Hello, everybody.
Greetings from our bed.
Greetings from our bed at 8 p.m. And you know what us shooting anything at this time of night means? It means
from our bed.
Well, now from our bed on the vineyard, we did it from the living room. What it means is that we're trying to accommodate somebody's schedule who's way, way on the other side of the world. So we are today talking to
the fabulous
Michael Lucas, who is one of the wonderful writers of Wentworth. You'll remember him as the writer of 3 very, very powerful episodes from season 4, Screw Lover, Plan B, and Afterlife. So we need to pick his brain because we couldn't think of a better way to celebrate the beginning of season 5 than to
find out some of the secrets and insights
behind season 4, which we couldn't get at the time because nobody wanted to talk about it.
And nobody wants to talk about anything about season 5, so this is perfect.
Exactly. So let's talk to Michael.
Oh, you're so cute, Michael. You look like an actor.
No, not at all.
1 minute in and he's already blushing.
Sorry, what was that?
1 minute in and she's already getting you blushing.
Well, successfully. I know trust me, if Kate Jenkinson were here, she would be obviously wiping me off the screen. So
I don't think so. Well, I bet you can hold your own, although she is a cutie.
Yeah, as she said to send her apologies, and she actually offered to come and say hello and then sit here while I did it, but I thought it would be too distracting for me and too annoying for the viewers because how frustrating to know that she's just right there.
And not saying a word, right? But that was very sweet of her. But we're happy to have you. Just
thank you.
Folly à toi.
And we're going to follow up with her as soon as she can do it.
So let's talk a little bit about you and Wentworth. Wentworth. Were you a fan of the show before you got the job?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. And in fact, growing up in Australia, the Prisoner, the original, loomed very large. When I was a kid, that was on sort of late nights, and I was not allowed to watch it. I was too young. But it was terrifying. I remember finding ways to watch bits of it and just being so terrified by. I remember the steam press just. But then when they rebooted it, I was one of those skeptics when I heard that they were redoing it because the original seemed so tied up in that era of the 70s and 80s that I just couldn't imagine how they do it. But when I saw that first episode, I mean, the cast was so amazing. It was so confident. And Pete, who wrote that episode 1 of Wentworth, had just done this incredible job. So yes, I was a bit of a super fan of it, which I have to say made it very exciting to get the opportunity to write for it, but also just profoundly nerve-wracking.
I can
the
imagine.
most nerve-wracking job I've ever had.
Well, and also because from looking at your bio, all you've done before that was mostly comedy, dramedy, and all of a sudden you get to write a few of the darkest episodes on one of the darkest shows on television. How did that happen?
Well, that was quite deliberate because almost all of what I've written is comedy or romantic comedy, which wasn't really by design. I think it's just one of those things that, you work on one project that establishes you and then you end up being pigeonholed. So I was looking for a way to diversify and I mean, I thought you couldn't get further away from what I had written than Wentworth. So it was quite deliberate in that sense, but also ironically, when I came into Wentworth, they probably went for the biggest love arc that they've ever. I suppose actually that's not true. They have had big love arcs, but this was a particularly big one. And so ironically, when I came into it, out of all the people in the room, I guess I had the most experience writing love stories, essentially. And so I felt like Wentworth shifted slightly closer to what I was comfortable with just when I arrived.
But that's good. That makes you really important to the mix.
Yeah, and I was terrified about how dark it was and whether or not I could write a scene without landing jokes, which is normally how I would approach a scene. But in actual fact, there is a fair bit of humour in there.
No,
I mean,
there's quite
Boomer in particular, Sonia, even Ali and B have their moments of comedy. So it wasn't. Once I got settled in, it didn't feel as foreign as I feared.
And how did you actually get to Wentworth to write to Wentworth? How did that? Did you have to send samples, or how did that go?
I didn't have to send samples, but I think it's fair to say that it was one step at a time. I came in to write episode 4, and I think I was contracted to just write that one script, and then it was a bit of, let's see how we go, which is just as much from me, because I was terrified it was going to be a burning failure, but luckily that went successfully, and then they offered me 2 other scripts, but the 2 were back to back, which was a real coup. So it was one step at a time, and I was waiting for the moment when they got my first draft, and that was the most horrifically nerve-wracking wait, because I was convinced that they were going to read it and think it read nothing like Wentworth. I got all the characters wrong, and I'd be sort of sent quietly away. But thankfully, it didn't work out.
No, it was, in fact, 4 was Screw Lover, right? Yeah. Excellent. And 8 and 9 were two of the most dramatic. Ever. Well, it's not called the Surreal Baptism.
No,
that's what we call it.
Since you told us, you call it.
Right. It was what's it called?
Plan B.
Plan B.
And Afterlife.
An Afterlife, yeah.
Well,
and when we were doing the plotting of the whole series, it was always sitting there on the board. Ferguson attempts to kill B, but it was unsure when we were plotting what episode that would fall. And then at a certain point, I realised it was going to fall in episode 8, which was mine. And because I was new to the show, and Pete and Marcia and John, who I was working with, have been there pretty much all of them since the beginning. I couldn't believe they were so generous to. If I were them, and I'd been working on the show for years, I don't think I would have allowed the new guy to take such a big story point, but they did. It was very collaborative. Obviously, we plotted it all together, but I just couldn't believe I got those episodes, and then also the Afterlife as well. For me, the plot point of B thinking that Ali was luring her, it was so heartbreaking and dramatic, and I just couldn't believe my luck in getting it.
Well, you did a brilliant job with all of them, but especially those 2 were kind of earth-shattering. They really were amazing.
Before you said when we plotted out the season, so you didn't just come in to write the 1 and then the 2. You actually were part of planning the whole story of the whole season.
Yeah, well, there had been initial planning. When I arrived, there had been sort of a master plan put in place, but it was relatively loose. You expect it will change a lot as you get into the detail of it. And I think there were 2 first drafts of episode 1 and 2, and then they were plotting episodes 3 and 4 when I came in. And then when that worked out, then the way that they work is there was a sort of core team of 4. And yes, you plot all the episodes together. And not only that, when the drafts come in, all 4 of us sit around together and go through sort of page by page and give thoughts and notes. So it's really collaborative and really in fact, it's probably the most collaborative TV writers' room I've been on, because normally, especially in Australia, you might get your episode, but then you certainly wouldn't be giving notes on anyone else's episodes or anything like that. Whereas this was so often the 4 of us sitting around a table working it through, and in the on the set, the offices are right above where they're filming, so you really feel part of the whole process. And so yes, I was, although the master plan was sort of there, the actual episode by episode plotting had yet to really be worked out. As I mentioned, they were still, plot points like Ferguson attempts to kill B were sort of floating, and it wasn't quite certain where they would be. And then, of course, just things evolve when you cast the new characters like Ali and Jake and everything. So in the end, I felt hugely involved, and particularly as I got into the last run, because I mean, there's so much sort of back plotting as well. You know where you're going, and then you have to sort of rigorously go back and make sure all the other episodes work towards it, as opposed to relationship comedy, which I've been used to, which is much looser when it comes to these big revenge stories and all of the intrigue of Wentworth. They're really meticulous about
things have to match up. So you're not just given a breakdown then, and you basically write dialogue. You're in the whole plotting part of the story making too.
Yep, we plot it all together, and then we write a breakdown ourselves for our own episodes, and then with every new delivery, when we write the breakdown, we all meet and go through the breakdown and add ideas, and so for something like episode 8, which was a particularly intricate and quite problematic bit of plotting, we really did days sitting in a sort of chilly boardroom. I was worried that this plot was going to drive her on bananas, because we had to, it was quite complicated. We had Ferguson killing B, we had Kaz and attempting her process, and we had the information coming in, and there were so many ways that it would all fall apart. And I can remember so many times when it felt like we just hit a brick wall and it was never going to work. And I needed, the brain power of
help
4 people to make
absolutely
it through,
so a scene like, let's say, the baptism, the surreal baptism, the murder, the attempted murder, is that intricately choreographed? There's no room. Is there any room for improvisation in something that way, or is it choreographed to an nth degree?
Well, it is carefully choreographed, and in fact, one of the amazing things about working on Wentworth is, because we are plotting it literally right on top of where they're going to be filming it. Often when you start meeting with the director, you can just walk downstairs and start playing it out. So for that particular scene, I had full access to that kitchen and that, and so did the director, Adrian, and you spend quite a lot of time stepping through the space and figuring out how it might work logistically, and then reflecting that in the script. But having said that, the cast is so amazing, and the directors are very adept and limber, and if they see opportunities on the day that are great, they certainly have more than enough confidence to try it. And a few, the biggest one in that sequence that was not in the script was Ferguson cleaning the bench top. That was, I imagine, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure it must have been Pamela Ray, and something that she worked out with the director and tried, and it was brilliant.
Oh, she's so amazing.
But the rest of it's quite tightly scripted. She didn't really deviate from the lines she was given, but that action certainly brought it all together.
I can just relive it.
And you said, by the way, that the writers are right there next to where they shoot. Does that mean that also the cast has input as to what's being written?
Definitely, not so much. Not in the plotting so much, but certainly when they start reading drafts of the scripts. We're all intermingled, and so there's plenty of opportunity for them to come and make suggestions or query, or sometimes just go through the logic from their perspective. I remember there was a good example in episode 8, which was originally, there's a bit right at the end, and in the final episode, it's Will that hears the recording and goes down to Kaz, and Kate Atkinson identified that if that originally it was written that it was her, it was Vera that had that, but then she identified that if she did that, it kind of ruined the logic for the coming episodes. So that was an example of her catching something. Because as the actors, they're going through we have to have an overview of all the characters, but they're looking at that one role very specifically, thinking through every case. So, sometimes they'll pick up things. And then just sometimes they'll just be fun little additions. Like a lot of, Katrina, who plays Boomer, sometimes there'll be scenes that I've written, and the scene that I wrote ends, but she had another bit of business that she just sort of ran on with at the end, and it was so good that they kept it in. So yeah, it's pretty collaborative in that way. Not so much in terms of the initial plotting, but certainly once there are scripts there, there's really a bit of an open discussion, which sort of makes it stronger.
Do you have, by the way, I know that in American TV shows they have a Bible. Do you have Yeah. Does Wentworth have a Bible?
Oh yeah, and well, they have a Bible. Actually, I don't know whether there was a Bible for the whole. I assume there was for the whole show at the beginning, but there's certainly when I arrived, there was a season 4 Bible. But then, even at the point I had arrived, which was only, they only had a couple of eps written, everything was starting to float. So your best laid plans come awry. But certainly there was a document that pitched, the master plan of the series, and also what the journey was for B. Particularly those Bibles, they went through character by character and, outlined this is where B begins, this is what she's going to be confronted with in this series and where she'll end up. And all of that changed, but you've got to start.
Did it not say she's going to end dead?
It did. That was their right. I always knew that we were writing a tragedy for B, and well, indeed, a kind of Romeo and Juliet-esque tragedy. And
exactly.
So it's kind of amazing watching it play out because, in Romeo and Juliet, they announce obviously at the start of the play that it's a tragedy. So the audience always knows that. And through working on this, I felt like I got to see how Romeo and Juliet would play out in the modern age if there was no cue and no warning, and just how shocking and impactful it was. But yes, that was definitely there when I came on board. I'm trying to think what the biggest deviations were from the original plan. Certain things like the Sonia character and everything was sort of very loosely devised when I arrived. We filled in that later.
We love her.
Yeah. I do remember perhaps one of the things I remember being a little bit different was that Ali, as conceived, I think was going to have more of a resonance with Debbie, B's daughter, that she potentially was going to look a bit more like her. And obviously, Debbie died of a drug overdose or a hotshot, really. But as I recall, Ali's drug battle, maybe the audience picked up a bit of resonance there, and that through saving Ali, it was sort of healing for B. But as I recall, that was a bigger part of the conception of that relationship. But then when Kate was cast, she found her own, there was a sort of special magic to that chemistry that we ran with that moved it away from that a little bit.
But the audience did pick up on it. We had discussions on Talking Teal where people were talking about how it's kind of a redeeming journey for B to help Ali and all that.
You managed to blend, to start off with that and sort of come full circle with it and still have the romance. Did the romance happen sort of organically, or was it always planned, or was it because they had this magical chemistry that you all sort of...
Oh, no, that was absolutely always planned. That B would fall in love and find romantic tenderness for the first time. Yes, and I have to say I was nervous about that, but particularly excited about that. Obviously coming into it as a fan who had just sort of watched. Well, when I came into it, season 3 had an air jet, so I got to see. Firstly, I got to see like an advanced copy of season 3, so that was exciting. But then also, I knew that the two big things for season 4 were Ferguson's in the prison, and B's going to fall in love. And meet a tragic end, and obviously there were reasons to be excited about all of those things, but also very nervous about them. I was nervous about Ferguson coming into the prison was obviously such a juicy plot twist and interesting, but also hard, tricky to plot, tricky to pull off, and B, falling in love. I instinctively thought, I think the audience is just they're gonna get so invested in this, because after everything she has been through, to see her experience intimacy and tenderness is just going to be so powerful. But by the same time, I was also slightly nervous about whether the audience would go with her making that leap. But then, of course, once it was written, and especially once it was cast, all of that fell away.
They were so brilliant. You mentioned this thing about Pamela, about Ferguson, and it's one of the questions that actually we wanted to talk to you about, which is, it's so, to me, to all of us, highly unlikely that Ferguson would be put in the prison that she so badly managed. All the animosity, everything that had happened there, you had to make that work. You had to have Pamela Rabe for as long as you could hold on to her. How did you all sort of rationalize that? Because even though we bought it, there was always still kind of a, really, she should be somewhere else.
It's absolutely a leap. And I mean, really, for that, I have to give. I think all of us were nervous about it, because if the audience just completely rejects that, then then the whole show is kind of cooked. But really, that's a testament to Marcia, who was the script producer of the show. And it was just working backwards, going rigorously. We spoke to, we have real, prison wardens that consult on the show. And I mean, it was really just trying to seize upon any possible reason we could. It did help that there is only one women's prison in the state that I live in. So, but I do understand that in a lot of countries that would seem quite odd. But it actually is the truth here. Mm-hmm. And then just relying on every bit of Ferguson cunning to manipulate the system. But particularly, I think the crunch of it fell on the hardest leap for me. Actually, wasn't so much. I could believe to a certain extent that she might be in the same facility but separated,
completely.
Yeah, and so obviously that was the first two episodes, and the really, really tricky thing to balance was her motivation for coming out, and how that was, how that was plotted beat by bit. And I do remember that episode 2 going into episode 3, Pete McTighe wrote episode 3, and that went through just so many drafts to try and. I mean, episode 3 has her backstory, how she manipulated the psychologist as well, psychiatrist, and it just basically was a lot of discussion, a lot of plotting, a lot of hitting roadblocks, and a lot of just sitting there stressing about whether this juicy story point is just a bridge too far. And I just credit Marcia and Pete in particular, and John, for doing everything they could to give as much logic and justification to it so that you'd go with it. But I do certainly understand that, and I appreciate that you
suspension of disbelief. We actually, you reminded me of something that I want to ask you about. I think it was in episode either 2 or 3 where Joan and Bridget sit together, and Joan asks her the 3 questions about secret from her childhood, something that she kept from her parents. What's your favorite childhood game? What was it? The three questions. Do you remember that? It wasn't your episode, I know. But
like Hannibal Lecter-esque.
Right.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
It was totally shot as film noir with a lot of eyeballs, and and everybody tried to figure out what the questions were trying to lead us to believe. And I thought, they either have something planned, or they completely just threw these questions in and thought, let's see what happens with that later.
And what was it?
I have to say that one is more, those 2 scripts were sort of there before I came on board. So that question's probably better given to Marcia. I think it's episode 2 that you're talking about.
Maybe, yeah.
It was earlier.
And knowing her, given how detail she is, I don't think there would have been anything accidental about them. But in fact, I'm going to go. I will check it. I'm not sure how calculated they were and what they were supposed to lead to, but I'm pretty certain that she's sort of more than anyone is overseeing the whole thing. So I don't think anything there would have been accidental.
So we didn't really get a payoff on that. So
no, that's why we're
looking forward to it.
And that is the other thing, is that they absolutely, and I've never been on a show that does this, they're absolutely thinking ahead to the following series. I mean, I feel like, and I'm not on season 5, so I can't really give away any spoilers, even if I wanted to. But I mean, I certainly know that I felt it most with the Sonia storyline, which, although that may have been enjoyable in season 4, I can assure you that that's part of a much bigger game plan.
We felt that. We felt that.
Yeah, and absolutely they were planting that and strategically getting it right. And sometimes I remember that, Marcia and Pete must have been having advanced meetings considering where it goes, and we'd come into the plot of 7 and 8, and there would be all this detail that we needed to establish in that storyline to prepare for season 5. So it is entirely possible that a scene that was planted in episode 2 in questions could very, very well pay off, down the track.
I like payoffs.
Well, I want to ask you about, because you mentioned Biennale, and something that our viewers are quite interested in, that love story.
Yeah.
And how did that happen, that they decided to give her a love story, and specifically with Allie? Tell us a little bit more about that. And also, you said, I did a little research on you, and I read some of your interviews, and you said that because networks are so afraid of antagonizing the viewers with gay characters and gay relationships, that it's kind of hard and limiting to write for gay couples. And I was wondering how that came into play with Biennale, and also if you know about how it comes to play with Frankie and Bridget, because we certainly always say, oh, why don't we have enough Bridget? We don't have enough Bridget. So
I know. Well, in terms of Frankie, I mean, I agree. Frankie and Bridget, I mean, I came to this fresh off season 3, so I was so invested in them. But I have to, I mean, Frankie and Bridget ultimately was casting availability and everything. And trust me, as much Bridget and Frankie as we could get on screen, we would. But you are sort of bound by, all sorts of external factors. But yes, I've worked mostly on network, broadcast television here, which is quite restrictive. I have to say it's changed. I mean, I've been working since about 2010, and which is not really that long, but I've felt it change significantly for the better. But certainly, I'm very used to on network TV, arguing down to the frame about how long a same-sex kiss can be held, and the sense that, I've written so many love stories for television and film, but almost all of them have been straight, and often when a support character comes in who is gay, they can have their little moments, but it's quite coy. But I have to say, Wentworth is completely the opposite of that, which is one of the reasons why I was so desperate to work on it. I mean, it's so unabashed, and we know, they all know that that's a huge part of the appeal for the audience, is that the representation, particularly of lesbian relationships, is so limited that it's just a joy and a relief to finally get some, not just one relationship, but multiple relationships that have the.
And if not a women's prison, then where?
Exactly. But I do remember, especially, even though we were a little bit limited in terms of scheduling and everything, we absolutely knew coming into season 4 that we had to give the audience as much as we could physically of Frankie, and Bridget at home, and just pay off, give a sense of the play of that and the fun of that. And we also were aware of the fact that we couldn't, it would just be wrong to end that relationship or to break it up or anything.
Good.
So yeah, I have to say in terms of Wentworth, it doesn't play in. In fact, if anything, it's just well established that that's a core part of what people love about the show, and you've got to be careful about getting into sort of fan service, but by the same token, there's there's a genuine, wholehearted embrace of those kinds of storylines, which was just wonderful for me. I mean, I was so relieved, and I knew that B and Ellie, it was always designed to be, one of sort of equal standing with the Ferguson storyline as the big thing of the season, and I was tremendously excited because I was also really, really excited that it was going to be a storyline about someone who B had very limited awareness of her own sexuality and had just not been in any position in life to date where she'd really been able to properly explore love and intimacy. And I'm someone that came out sort of relatively later, sort of mid to late 20s myself, and so even though obviously my circumstances were extremely different to me, so I wasn't in a women's prison on murder charges, but there were elements that I could relate to, and I was just so excited. I'd never had the opportunity to tell that particular story before, and so all those elements. I remember at one point there's a counselling session with Bridget that I got to write, and from a plot perspective, it's not essential. I mean, it could go, and I remember at one point, going through a production meeting where they were talking about potentially cuts and everything like that, and for a second it was like, does this really advance the story? And I was like, oh, that's it.
You're talking about the fuck the labels, right?
Well, so much into that scene, and I knew the audience would, a huge part of the audience would love it, but. Yeah, I mean, all of those details of B's nervousness and her her fear really, and the awkwardness of it all of those steps, I was just so excited to be able to sort of help conceive them, and then obviously just so thrilled when I saw the casting, and I knew it was going to go off like a rocket. I had never had any doubt about that, and it was just a joy considering how restrictive a lot of my experiences in the past have been.
Did it change your writing process, writing for Allie, knowing who was cast to play Allie?
Oh yeah. Well, I've known Kate for a long time. I wish I could take complete credit. I can't take any real credit for her casting. She just did this amazing audition. It's always a strange experience when I work on a number of TV shows, and she's one of those great actresses that's always in the mix, and it's I always have my fingers crossed that she's going to get the role, and she always does so well because she's such a good actress. There's been a few heartbreaking times where she's been down to the final 3. And I'm involved with the production, and but we have had a couple of times where she's got major roles, but this was the biggest time by far, and I was so excited because she Kate can do comedy. She's sort of one of those stars that has a natural charisma, but she can play devastation and trauma so viscerally. I mean, I don't even know where it comes from, because I mean, you've spoken to her and you know that
she's a darling,
very centered person, but somehow she just has access to all of this stuff. And I just knew that Allie, perhaps more than any other role that she had played, would allow her to show just all of those sides to her. And
but she's sensitive.
Sorry?
She's very sensitive.
Yeah.
Empathetic.
Yeah, and it did influence the way that I wrote Allie, and I think I feel like initially, before Kate was cast and everything, the sense of Ali's addiction past and recovery from that was more prominent early on, and the sense of her being troubled. I mean, it's there anyway, but it kind of moved towards that Ali could make B smile, and could tease B, and I think certainly from my perspective, a lot of that was because I knew that Kate had been cast, and she has this quality. I mean, Kate Jenkinson in our personal life, she has laughed at me so hard, but it's never with a sense of, somehow she can laugh at me to my face, and I feel nothing but love from her.
She's charming,
and she's a bit of a superpower, and I definitely thought that that would be the most disarming thing for B, to have someone be able to just laugh at her, but with love, and to tease her, because there's no one in that place that can really. I mean, maybe Maxine a little bit, but Ali sort of stood alone as someone who could tease B, and that's very, very much a quality that was maybe there in the character, but once Kate was cast, and we all
ran with it,
ramped that up, yeah, and it just was informed every one of their interactions, like even when coming into the kitchen supply room, and little lines like Ali can say, "Did you dispense any justice today?" and she's totally teasing her, and Danielle also played it so beautifully, the responses to it. Kate had a huge impact on that dynamic, and I mean probably the biggest example was, and it wasn't my episode, but it was when they were in solitaire in
the rap scene.
Yeah, the rap scene. Yeah. I mean that scene is. I don't think anyone would be any surprise to hear that that's pretty unfiltered Kate Jenkinson. That's the kind of that's very similar to how she can be in real life, and it was a very astute deployment of that quality to build that relationship. Yeah, I mean, I just loved it when I
and here I thought I couldn't love her anymore.
Well, it was definitely very realistic to think that she, of all people, would be able to break down all those walls that be put around her, because she was just so charming and lovable and kind of irresistible. So
yes, yeah,
that's great to hear. But we do have quite a few questions to ask you about B's death.
Especially since they knew probably from the outset what B's arc was going to ultimately be. Danielle said recently,
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. It was very closely guarded.
Clearly.
I couldn't tell you. It certainly wasn't my job to manage when, the cast and everyone knew, but certainly from a plotting perspective, yes, I mean, it was the story that I arrived. It was already there.
And it makes sense.
Let's just confirm for a second that B is dead, because there are some people out there who are still holding hope.
I wish I could. Well, look.
No, don't say that.
Michael, don't fan the flames.
I just don't want to do anything that might affect people's viewing of. Oh, look, no. I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that question. All I'll say is that I feel like that storyline was pretty definitively concluded.
Unless they decided to pull a real soap opera ploy.
Sorry, and I certainly don't want to give false hope.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, Pete McTighe confirmed it. Joe Porter confirmed it.
Right. Okay, sure.
Danielle said that she didn't know until a few weeks before it happened that it was going to happen.
And then most of the cast didn't know until I think the very last minute that they, really didn't know.
Yeah, I think that a big part of that is the practical, challenge of keeping a plot. Like, it would just be awful if something like that was out early, and because we shoot so far in advance and it's a crew of so many, there are hundreds of people there. So, funnily enough, this is not my first experience working on a show that did a huge death. In fact, there was another romantic comedy I did with Kate Jenkinson.
Offspring.
Yeah, and so I, for better or worse, have been involved with two of these sort of critical deaths on Australian television, and in both cases, the producers opted to tell the bare minimum. I think from a perspective of just managing secrecy, because cast crews, and it's notorious, things filter out, and an explosive plot point like that would spread like wildfire. I mean, I even remember when you're plotting, the last thing we do is take pictures of the plotting boards at the end of the day to record. And I even remember we were racing around, like making sure that any reference to that was completely scrubbed off before we even took the pictures that went into our phones, just in case we were hacked. So
wow,
or any kind of delay was, or hacked or accidentally texted. I don't know.
Accidentally texted.
You're lucky the Russians didn't find out.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Offspring, and I actually was going to ask you about that because you had a very, very, the fans reacted very strongly to Patrick's death.
Yeah.
And so did you ever tell the writers of Wentworth, listen, maybe we should rethink this because look at what happened there?
I know. Oh, it was pretty much the first, it was one of the first things I said when I wanted in there, that I just couldn't believe. I have to say, with Offspring, I was very much in the room that conceived that death. So I really have to take 100%, responsibility for it. And then when I walked into Wentworth, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go from one like notorious death to another. I'm just going to be seen as
the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I did. I told them, but everyone knew. I think that's why the information was so closely guarded. Everyone knew that it was going to be it was the biggest thing that you could do on the show, and the
devastating,
the most thing that you could possibly do, and so the impact was no surprise. But having said that, you can know intellectually what it might be like, but then once it actually happens, it always, on a certain level, it still takes you by surprise. But it's a very conflicted feeling because on one hand, you feel the pain of the audience, and you've wept for that character too, and you can't help but be confronted when you know that something that you've worked on has been so upsetting. But on the other hand, there's a part of you that also has to be aware of the fact that the hardest thing to do in drama is not the hardest thing, but the thing that we're all aiming for is to just make people care. And when people care on that kind of quantum level, it's very humbling, and also unnerving, and you feel everything about it, really.
Yeah, you have great responsibility for.
Yeah.
You probably had to go into hiding for a few weeks.
Well, and Dan was so great, and that death was so stunning, so monumental, so Shakespearean in its scope.
I'm really glad you used that word, because I have to say Shakespearean came up a lot for me. Obviously with that storyline and with that kind of a death, but just throughout the series, and even in that plot point when B thought that Ali
was dead.
Oh well, Ali was dead, but also before that, even when B thought that Ali had tried to murder her, I remember thinking to myself, on what other show would I ever get to write something this grand? Normally I write things where the problem in the relationship is some sort of little misunderstanding or something, but in this one, she literally thinks that the person who loves her more than anyone tried to kill her, and I kept thinking, it's like Shakespeare.
Yeah, it is Othello or something. It's yeah.
And certainly, that death, the way it played out was so dramatic, so extreme, and absolutely like something that you would see in Shakespeare.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I kept saying,
which is the highest compliment, really and truly. I'm a huge Shakespeare fanatic, and
I kept saying that I never loved Bea as much as I loved her in that moment when she sacrificed herself for the greater good. So that was.
Oh well, that's good to hear. I mean, my experience with my previous
death,
huge
murder, murdering a character.
Yes, that's fair enough. Guilty as such. But my experience is that obviously it's incredibly confronting for everyone, particularly the fans, and that there is, particularly in that gap when you're waiting to see what the next step of the show is. It's a horrible wait, and there's a lot of anger, and understandable anger and frustration. But our experience previously is that once you see the story start to play out and you see what it amounts to and what it triggers, once you can start to see the bigger purpose, then it becomes somewhat easier to process.
Somewhat.
And so I certainly hope that's the case for viewers that were particularly upset by it.
They've had a long time to live with it.
For some people, it was enough time. For some people, it will never be enough time.
And I still hear. I mean, previously with Offspring, I still often get tweets saying I never ever went back to that show, and I understand. I understand that reaction.
There are probably going to be a few people, but hopefully most of them will start seeing other people talk about the show and will not be able to resist, and then we'll go back.
Yeah, and it's amazing, as central to everything as Bea was. There's still many, many magnificent characters and actors on that show.
Well, and it's certainly, I mean, they're framing all of season 5 around the revenge of Bea's death. So it's not like they killed her and now they're moving on. It's going to all be about avenging her death. So.
Absolutely. As I said, I can't really speak to season 5, it's certainly not like, that character has been moved off and the show will move on. Everything is going to be the result of that finale, and I mean, as a fan of the show, I'm dying.
I know, we can't wait.
I'm terrified as well because when we left, Ali doesn't know yet, and I'm presuming. I mean, I don't want to. I don't know how it's going to begin, but that's obviously something I'm very conscious of. And I'm just desperate to know what is going to happen, basically, which I think is always the goal of storytelling. And so I have, knowing that team, I have so much faith in what they're going to do, and so I can't wait.
Yeah, we can't either.
I actually asked you to bring a script with you, to have a script ready. And I've never read it, so I was just wondering because have you seen the movie The Heat?
With Sandra Bullock
and Melissa McCarthy.
Yeah.
So that scene when they're in the bar and they get drunk and they do all this
craziness
stuff for 15 minutes. They just do crazy things. So I've heard that the script actually just said they go to a bar, they get drunk, and do crazy things. So so it always makes me.
Well, when you've got Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock, such great improvisers.
Exactly.
I probably do that too in the script.
But it always makes me think when I watch something. I mean, really, specifically the surreal baptism scene, which to me was just mind blowing. How all the elements came together to create this beautifully chaotic but precise scene. And it always makes me think when I watch something like that, how much of this was on paper?
What did it look like on the paper?
Right?
Yeah.
And then how did it how did it translate eventually into what I saw? So from what you know of how it ended up and what you wrote, is there anything that you can read to us that would be?
Yeah. Well, I do have it. I've got it. I can show it to you.
Right.
It was funny actually because I went back and watched the episode last night and then went back to the script, and the single biggest change is just that in the final episode it was intercut a lot more heavily, but I always knew that they would do that. But for the purposes of writing the script, particularly the biggest example is that sort of monologue that Ferguson delivered to B. And I like, you can see the script page here. I wrote it as a consistent scene, and of course is how they performed it and shot it. But then ultimately, the director and the editor intercut it, which I absolutely knew was probably going to be the way they approached it. But the speech itself is pretty close. I haven't gone through word by word. It may have been cut down a bit, but as I said, it doesn't mention. Hang on, let me see what I've.
And all the.
I've Yeah, I mean that sequence. Slam Ferguson has hauled B up on the counter beside the rapidly filling sink. B has a jerk of life, kicking at her legs, but Ferguson clamps down, holding her in place, pinning her to the metal sink, looking right at her. And I've got her asking, ask yourself, why are you still struggling? I'm not sure that line made it through.
Sounds familiar to me.
Well, I'm not sure about
that. I'm not sure either.
The whole part about everybody will leave you and
that's all here. I mean, and then I described the scene as a surreal baptism, as we've mentioned. B sprawled out, her head beside the sink, Ferguson looming over her, dominant, pressing her in place. Yes, and then she gets her. There are only two ways to die in prison. B, you could fall victim to an attack, and then she presents. It's so horrible when I read it.
It's amazing.
It's brilliant.
It is brilliant.
And then after a painful eternity, you'd fall prey to cancer or heart disease, perhaps, or a stroke, and you die an old wretch, your legacy forgotten, vomiting yourself to death in a barren cell. I have so much more respect for you than that. I hope you can see that this peaceful, silent passing is a victory. This is my gift. With occasion and ceremony, Ferguson gently slides B's head under the water. Her eyes swell with horror as she's submerged. So it was pretty. I mean, was pretty tightly followed. The genius addition was the cleaning around the sink, which Pamela Ray did so beautifully. And from the director's perspective, I never specified that it was so strictly B's point of view. He obviously had a B cam.
A B cam.
So to speak.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, they really did it well, because to a certain extent, sometimes he would have B's hair fall over it. So I can only imagine that I wasn't on the set or anything that day, but he must have had a little camera, and they must have had either Danielle's hair herself or a wig or something like that to deploy. And then also the other thing he added, well, the way that he chose to shoot it was that incredible underwater. So, that's a difference, actually. The other big difference is that I had written it that B was on her back and that she was dragged towards the sink and face would go down. And so I think it's even specified here that, so therefore she's looking up through the water and she can see Ferguson's face. And that's sort of... Yeah, that's sort of specified that she sees Ferguson's eyes are still piercing, staring down. But ultimately, I think when they blocked it through, that blocking was just too awkward. Like the positioning of Danielle would have had to be,
Yeah.
And it didn't work. So they solved that really beautifully by having her face down and then having that incredible shot. We see
and
her
it works
face.
really great because also, we couldn't see really well. So we see her in the water, and all of a sudden Kaz shows up and pushes Ferguson away. And all we see is this, kind of like a kerfluffle that happens, and we don't really know what happens until they move to the camera on top. So it was,
right.
It helped the nervousness because it was kind of hard to tell what was going on from that perspective. But
were any actors harmed in the making of that scene?
Not to my knowledge, although I mean, when you see, particularly when the guards come in, when you see the way Kaz kicks, and I mean, it's amazing that they're not hurt more. And also, I mean, I can't even imagine how much time Danielle spent with her head submerged. I mean, they're so game. I do remember I was really nervous about that sequence, that mainly because I was so paranoid it would be one of those moments that you see in sort of especially bad films of the 60s, bad old James Bond movies, where the villain could kill the hero instantly, but they choose to do it in such a way that allows just enough time for the hero to be rescued. And I was really terrified that if we got this wrong, then the audience would just be sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Had her opportunity, she should have done it. But that's why the combination of that choice to clean the sink, which felt so in character and made sense, and also I think that's why they built the intercutting in the way that they did.
To show everybody else was otherwise occupied.
OCD to the end.
Well, and actually, writing for Ferguson, did the writers do research on sociopaths and OCD and all that? And, I mean, how does that factor when you write Ferguson? What is it like to write Ferguson?
Psychopaths, yes, absolutely. Particularly Marcia had done an enormous amount of research on it, and I mean, wildly so for the for the scenes where she is speaking to the psychiatrist, and I mean, all of that informed the plotting of everything. But for me, I mean, she's such a fun character to write. I can't tell you.
You can do whatever you want.
Extreme intelligence, but also there's a particular turn of phrase. You can give Ferguson somewhat more flowery language to a certain extent, and Pamela always finds her way through it to pull it off. I mean, she's very eloquent. She's a very eloquent villain. But absolutely, it's all informed by that. But for me, actually, writing Ferguson, it's all about those flickers. I mean, for me, the whole show, and this is just my own personal interpretation of it, it's at its core, I think the show is about, it doesn't matter if you could be the most caring, loving, gentle person in the world. In the right circumstances, there's brutality that we can all find somewhere. And then conversely, you can be the most brutal, calculating, amoral person in the world, but there must be something there somewhere, some flicker where there may be empathy. And for me, every character in the show and the whole setting kind of explores that. And so for Ferguson, what makes her electrifying for me is that she can be the most fearsomely psychopathic killer, but then every once in a while you'll get a flicker of what might appear to be is it care and empathy, or is it another calculation? And so for me, it was those little hooks. And I actually think her action of cleaning the bench, which whilst it is OCD, and even the way that Pamela sort of kept moving Bee's hair out of her face in a really twisted way, it's this weird kind of flicker of care and tenderness that makes it electrifying. So that was. I mean, I don't know. I also am aware that there's a big fan base out there that think Ferguson is misunderstood.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And but I think that's just a testament to how well Pamela plays it and how those little notes are picked up on. That you can see flickers of other emotions there when it could just be it would be so easy to play it as just a flat, remorseless.
She's so subtle. She's so nuanced.
And you constantly wonder, is it real? Is she playing them? Is she really feeling it, or is she faking it? And from what I'm hearing, you don't know.
You're not exactly sure either when you write it.
I have to say in my scenes, because I was mostly dealing with Ferguson and Kaz, and I was very much writing that she was manipulating Kaz.
Yeah, Kaz was so easy to manipulate.
Yeah, yeah. But then again, I think there are other. Like, I think her passion for the Indigenous inmate that
Tasha.
Tasha.
Yeah. Oh, Tasha. I mean, for me, it would be fascinating to go through. It'd be fascinating to go through beat by beat with Pamela and and see, where her intention was complete manipulation and her intention. But often, I mean, I think sometimes the inherent in that character is, and why she's so brilliant, is because it is a manipulation and there is calculation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't draw on some of those emotions, and that it is this complex mix of, on one level she has an end game, but on the other level she's tapping into something as well. So I think the ambiguity is kind of intentional, but also I think there are beats where both readings are correct. Where she is such a complex figure that she's feeling something and she's using those feelings to her own end as well. That would be my reading of it.
Was she your favorite character to write for? Did all that intellect make it easier or harder?
Who was your favorite?
Who was your favorite character to write for?
Really, I would say, yeah. but on the other hand, it's a pretty close race with Boomer. So I don't know whether it's that I like the most intricately intelligent person and then perhaps the most straightforward as well. Both of them were, and I also got to write Boomer's first conjugal with Baz, which that was another one that I could, as much as I, talk constantly about Ferguson killing B, I remember when I got that one and I just could not believe my luck that I got to write. And I also got to write Maxine saying to Boomer, "Let's have a baby together," which was such a payoff.
God.
Yeah.
Yes, everybody was waiting
you
for
had
baby
good
vaccine.
stuff. You had a lot of good stuff.
I know. So lucky. And also the other character, the one character that I only briefly got to write, which was unfortunate from my perspective, was Frankie, because, watching those first 3 seasons, I just loved her so much. And also I knew Nicole a little from her previous job, and I just thought she'd done such a good job. And when I took the job on Wentworth, I was imagining I was going to get all these Frankie scenes. And then I found out that she was sprinkled throughout the series, but not so much in my acts. But then luckily I got to write the scene where she comes and visits B, and I got to live all my fantasies of writing
please.
Oh, that's one of the great scenes. Sorry, I yelled.
Yes,
I get excited.
It was one of the best scenes ever. I mean, it's just, and especially in such a dark episode, it was such a ray of light.
I'm so glad, because I just love writing that scene. Again, as you can see, when I was writing it, I thought through how every scene could go wrong, and and with that scene, I was paranoid that the audience. I mean, truth be told, B and Frankie, it's not like they were cozy friends. Far from it. Often they were brutal enemies.
They were comrades in arms.
They understood each other.
But the warmth of that scene, I just really hope the audience. I was nervous about whether the audience would accept that was their instant reaction. But then once I saw them play it,
it was beautiful.
And of course, Bridget had engineered that specifically, because she knew that was what B needed. So yeah, that was. I think I wrote that one. My first draft of that scene was so long because I just was so excited to write Frankie, and also it felt like they've got so much to talk about.
Exactly.
B's been in love, and Frankie's going to be all over that. And yes, I think I first delivered about a 10-page scene, and then I had to realize I couldn't let that dominate the entire.
Too bad.
Is there a lot of, by the way, do you shoot a lot of more scenes that you end up actually using? Is there a lot that ends up on the cutting room floor?
I don't think so. Certainly not in my experience. I mean, there are things, and there are often segments of. It's more that there's usually segments of scenes that disappear. Often just because they're redundant. The actors convey so much, and you suddenly realise, we don't need that additional volley of dialogue. They've communicated that. And in fact, I actually had the opposite problem with my first episode. It came in short. They filmed it all, and and unfortunately, it didn't quite hit the time limit. I think it was because I'm just not used to writing so much action, and even though, I mean, in that sequence there was this whole attack on Will,
right?
That episode, yeah, and I had sort of elaborately described that, and it had swallowed up all of these pages. But then when they actually acted it out, it's like light. And so I had the opposite. It was too short, and Marcia had to find some moments to add a couple of additional scenes to fill the episode out. So that was a bit terrifying. But then thankfully I learned my lesson, and then 8 and 9 pretty much pretty much everything was as written. There wasn't much that was added or subtracted.
Great.
Now, are you going to come back? You're not in season 5. You left us. You're gonna come back.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, yes, it was very stupid on my part because I was so unconfident when I started Wentworth, and I was so paranoid that I was going to fail that I booked other work immediately, ending the Wentworth season, thinking, I don't want to, I want to hedge my bets. And then as it turned out, I would have loved to have come back, but I was already committed. Also, they, as you can imagine, given the plot, they rolled straight on to the forward planning for season 5 whilst they were still in the mode of season 4. It's a smart way to work so that everything integrated really well. So no, I'm not bad, but I would love to be. And I'm gathering from all of the billboards that I'm seeing around town here.
There's going to be season 6.
Well, yeah, and Ali's pretty prominent, and no one's safe in Wentworth, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But especially, if apart from everything else, the opportunity to write for Ali is a huge incentive to come back. But the whole show is. I mean, I loved it, and I'd come back in a heartbeat.
Oh, good. Well, tell us a little bit about The Wrong Girl, because that's
the project you left Wentworth for, right?
Oh no, not really. I mean, no. That was sort of written kind of parallel to Wentworth. No, that's not. And that one is, well, it's a rom-com, so it was completely back to my wheelhouse. And it's about a breakfast. It's based on a book. Here, quite a sort of well-loved rom-com book about a breakfast TV host. So it was a completely breakfast TV producer. Mm-hmm. So it was a completely different kind of show.
I'll say
in the realm of Bridget Jones, kind of. And then also I've been working on what I moved on to immediately was actually a sitcom called Rosehaven, which was set in a country town in a real estate agency, and it was the biggest conceivable difference to Wentworth because it's just a gentle half-hour sitcom about these sort of eccentric people in a country town. So there was a bit of a culture shock going from
I'll bet
and devastation to all of a sudden kind of relatively sweet, quaint jokes about country life.
Did you try to turn any of those people into psychopaths?
I did not. But it did. Working on Wentworth did shift me in terms of. I mean, there's so much story in Wentworth. They don't waste any time. And even when I was going through the episodes, watching them, I kept. There were the bits that I remember, obviously, the big bits, but then you just keep thinking, oh my God, this is a huge plot point as well. This, Ferguson sort of manipulating Jake, that's really big in its own right. Mm-hmm. So it's so loaded. And if anything, I've sort of taken that into the other genres, that sense of let's just pack it with story. Let's not waste a moment. Let's try and make every moment heart-stopping. Which is easy to do in Wentworth when the stakes are so high.
Not so easy in a little country town where you're ambling down country roads.
Exactly.
Well, we did notice that you write women a lot, right? A lot of your main characters you write for women. Why do you think that you understand women so much? I mean, we were thinking,
do you have sisters?
Are you close with your mother? Or
yeah, I do. I have. I do have sisters. Oh, a sister, sorry. And look, who knows, really? But I am very close to my mother, and this is going to make me sound weird, but when I was younger, my father, his job took us around the world, and I was actually correspondence school. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was correspondence schooled by my mother for a period of time. So we were incredibly close. And
you mean, is that like homeschool?
Yeah, for only for a couple of years, and it was simply because in Australia we start school a little earlier than you guys do. So I wasn't ready for US school, but I was supposed to be in school in Australia. So I suppose I did. You could definitely say that I was close to my mother, and then I don't know. I've just always had a lot of female friends, and I don't know. I can't explain. Also, a lot of I seem to I kind of obviously love big, loud, eccentric women who I realize. I mean, for me, they're all, those sort of characters are just magnetic and fun and electrifying. And I realize that they're unnerving to lots of people, unfortunately, in the world. But I just can't, I don't know, I can't seem to get enough of that kind of personality.
We'd get along so well, Michael.
Well, I think it's just the product of, as you probably predicted, just lots and lots of time with very unfiltered women, I would say.
Well, it worked
that
well
sounds
for
good.
you.
Yeah.
But you also at some point said that you were a suburban mother trapped in a gay man's body. So that kind of got us interested in knowing more about that.
You've really done research.
I try.
Well, you know what? I think that yes, that's true.
That's okay. We always say we have gay men.
I always had a friend who said that I had a gay man sensibility. So we understand those.
Totally reverse.
Oh, right. Well, you know what? I think weirdly, in some ways, that's reflected in the way I wrote B in those scenes, because I certainly remembered saying that I'm a suburban mum trapped in a gay man's body. Part of that was my intimidation at the begining of, I was in Sydney, which has a huge gay scene. Oxford Street, Sydney, had huge Mardi Gras every year. And I was intimidated by it at the beginning. And there's a real party culture, and I shrank from it. I was a homebody to a certain extent. And, it was wrapped up in a lot of other, it's such a leap to get comfortable with your sexuality when you're unsure of it, and then to be, I guess it speaks to the fact that I was intimidated to a certain extent, and I felt like those were emotions that she would have had too. That there was a lot of fear wrapped up in it. So that quote, I'm playing on that in quite a comedic way, and it's true. I mean, I'm baking banana bread later today, and I'm very rarely go out, and I'm much happier at home. But I think that all those things,
really absolutely, birds of a feather.
We'd stay home and watch musicals all day. That's what we do.
Well, not musicals.
Not musicals.
Watch a lot of sci-fi and drama.
But you did say also that I'm sorry, I'm bringing up all your old interviews.
No.
That because there's, I mean, probably you said that it's changed, but because there's not a lot of gay love scenes and romances to write, that you base a lot of your straight characters' romances on your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an episode in Offspring. I with my partner, one of our first dates, I completely ruined because I had terrible hay fever, and my eyes looked awful, and so I raced around the house looking for an antihistamine, and I found Ferguson.
What is that?
We're going to find out.
Well, Ferguson is just a very powerful antihistamine, and I took it, and it didn't seem to work, so I took another one, and it has this enormous sedative effect, and I knocked myself out, and I completely ripped off that entire story for Offspring.
Your life is a rom-com.
Yay.
I seem to do a lot of things about sedatives, don't I?
Your life is a rom-com. So you've I know that you started off. You had a debut film, and then you switched to television. Kind of. What do you prefer, television or film?
Probably television. I think there's something so exciting about writing for existing characters and that relationship. I feel like you're kind of in a dance with the cast. It's a collaboration, and I love being able to watch their performances and be inspired by them and put it back in the writing. Whereas with the film, of course, it's you've written it all, and then obviously you might make changes, as it's shot. But generally, it's pretty set. And for me, the real joy is that it's an ongoing thing, and that it's sort of you're in dialogue with the ensemble. So that's, I think, TV suits me, and I find it now really hard to go back to writing for film. Well, basically writing not knowing. I've been spoiled. It's so inspiring to write knowing, the likes of Danielle Cormack or Kate Atkins, whoever it is going to be performing it. And then all of a sudden, when you go back to writing a film and there's just, it's all imaginary. It's not as stimulating for me. So TV is winning at the moment.
Well, television is also, we watch a lot of UK and Australian television. In America, it's the golden age again. Everybody works on television. Every great actor wants to be on television. The scripts are fantastic. There's so much more freedom.
And you get to explore so
many different avenues, and you get to delve into characters, really. And you have these great actors who are speaking your lines and doing television.
Yeah, and the fact that they get to show, if you think about the range of everything that those women in Wentworth have been able to show, and unless it was long-form TV, you just wouldn't get that opportunity to show even characters that can seem, a character like Liz can, on one level, seem straightforward, but not at all, because she's shown all of these other sides to her, and that's why it's just such a gift, and that's why I love it, watching it and working on them.
What would be your dream project? There's one that I'm working on at the moment that's pretty much a dream one, but I don't know. Why did I bring that up? Because I don't know that I can talk about it. One thing I'd really, really love to do is to adapt something. I've never done that before. Wentworth was my first experience coming onto a show that existed and trying to learn, how to interpret a really well-established show, and which was terrifying, but then kind of electrifying. So I'd love to do an adaptation of something. I don't know what, because I certainly seem to find that every time I read a book that seems like it would make a fabulous adaptation, you look it up and it's already
optioned. Yeah,
and it's happening.
No one's done time and again yet. Maybe you could tackle that one. Isn't that the Jack Finney book? I think it is.
Or
is that Time After Time? Anyway, it's a classic book that they've tried 100 times.
Isn't it? Is it? That's not the one. Was it made? Was it made with like Christopher Reeve or something? No, I'm thinking.
No. That's Somewhere in Time.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No, this is a science fiction period piece that was written, 30 years ago by Jack Finney. That's just a tremendously fabulous, one of the best books I ever read, and I think it's Time and Again.
Well, do you see yourself doing sci-fi?
And it's not. It's more really a period mystery. But no one's been able to do it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look that one up. And I have been working on a show. It's not unfortunately commissioned yet, but I feel you would love it. It's about a group of female superhero crime fighters, but it's a comedy. It's a comedy. superheroes that are decommissioned. And have you seen the film What We Do in the Shadows? It's a vampire mockumentary.
No,
it's
but it
really
sounds
fun.
like fun.
It's a New Zealand film, and it's about a share house of vampires, and we're sort of taking that same approach to superheroes, and it's been devised by the actresses that are going to play these roles. So I am going into sort of fantasy superhero, still comic. But I'd love to do as many genres as I can. Wentworth was very encouraging in that way, to know that I'm not restricted to romantic comedy or comedy, that I can at a push write another genre. So
you can go dark,
and you were very
you
good.
You can go dark, boy.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite writer of any genre, any medium?
Oh my god! You pick one. There's a writer in Australia. She's a screenwriter at times, but she's mostly a novelist and a nonfiction writer called Helen Garner. I'm sure you probably haven't heard of her, but I would recommend checking her out. She's written extraordinary books about real life murder cases. There's one called Joe. Oh well, you should. There's one book called Joe Cinque's Consolation, and if you can, I'm sure you can get it from Amazon. But she's this incredible writer, and her level of insight and just her descriptive skills are, I mean, it's like it's a masterclass every time she writes anything. So she's one.
So it's Helen Gardner or Garner?
Yeah, Garner, Garner. Oh, I'd be delighted if you definitely check out Joe Cinque's Consolation.
Absolutely,
definitely.
And I also love, as you can probably tell from most of my other credits, Nora Ephron always loomed pretty low. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of my sort of fantasy of New York is because I've just read and watched so much Nora Ephron. I mean, and I mean everything, not just, I mean, I love When Harry Met Sally, but, Heartburn and all of her essays and, so.
She was brilliant.
She's pretty high up too. And then, obvious ones like, I have loved Sorkin, The West Wing, and a lot of, and The Social Network, and Joss Whedon. He's the other one that I feel like I have to mention.
You're a Buffy fan?
Buffy.
Yeah, I was a Buffy fan too.
Yeah, and I mean, my obsession with that was just completely unbridled.
Very diverse, very diverse and eclectic taste.
I guess I am. But isn't everyone really though?
No, not at all.
I mean, you sort of have to be in today's world, but I mean, I can't even count the number of times I've reinvented myself at my age. But a lot of people are stuck in a rut. They do what they do, and that's all they do. So
yeah. No, well, I mean, as you can probably, I guess I like going from one extreme to the other. If my recent batch of projects is
keeps things interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I have a little, I have a preseason, we're doing a preseason kind of a special show for Talking Teal, and I gave the viewers a questionnaire to answer. So I'm going to give you a few of those questions, and they're very quick, okay?
Yep.
No, they're not, don't worry, they're not, nothing serious.
No, I'm excited.
Describe yourself in one sentence.
I guess I'm an oversharing introvert, if that makes sense.
Total sense.
It does.
And it worked well for this interview.
Yeah, right.
Perfect.
Okay, name 3 TV shows you love besides Wentworth.
Buffy. Again, this is hard. Have you seen Happy Valley?
Oh, have we seen Happy Valley?
Yeah. Sorry.
No. It's a fair question.
We're just making a point that we're
obsessed with Happy Valley.
Yes, we're extreme fans.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, that's one that really stands out
Great
recently.
choice.
Yes.
The third one. I mean, it's just there's so many. I'm gonna say at the moment, I'm gonna say girls because I feel like that is I don't know. That's a show that cycles through backlash and people get I don't know. I feel like Lena Dunham gets a lot of attention and often critical attention. And I've just watched some of those episodes. There was an episode recently. Did you watch that at all?
We
No.
started
No.
to, but I don't
couldn't
know.
get into
Maybe
it.
we're too old.
Oh yeah, there was.
Oh,
one
you're not
episode-
too old.
No, I love when you love me.
I love you into my.
I love that.
We're 35 years apart. Maybe
Right.
I'm too old, and Liron, I don't know, is too old a soul.
No, exactly.
Well, I would say that as well. There was just one episode that recently that blew me away. Her sort of interviewing a writer who was accused of sexual assault, and I just felt like she was reaching and talking about things that no one else does. So I love that too.
She's an interesting girl.
Forever.
I want to give you a recommendation if you can find it in Australia, which I'm pretty sure you can. It's called The Americans. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah. Yes. No. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Such a
Yeah, no, and that could definitely make the list as well.
That's like a master
I mean,
class
particularly
in-
as it's gone on as
TV.
well.
As what?
It's hard stuff.
Oh, it is.
As
hard.
it's gone on, as it's progressed, it just
Mm-hmm.
It just gets
Yeah.
more and more incredible as it goes along, deeper and more terrifying at every moment.
Okay, you have the,
Yeah.
Yeah. What crime would land you in Wentworth?
knowing me, it would be. Oh God, it would be nothing violent because I'm. You would never know it from my writing on Wentworth, but I'm not violent. It would probably be some hideous administrative oversight that somehow I'd committed some tax fraud without even knowing that I had done it. That's what I imagine would probably undo me.
That's pretty okay.
And then
Wayne.
Well, it's you don't scare me, so that's good.
No,
I could scare you.
she could scare you.
I could believe that. I could believe
you
that.
could sense that, right?
Well, I feel you would. I put it this way. I think you could hold your own in the prison, whereas I do not think that I would hold my own. I think that'd be
She's
pathetic.
small, so she had to.
I had to
she
be-
had to
to be
develop
tough.
this big personality.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, and when you're in Wentworth Prison, who would you like to share a cell with? I know they don't really share cells, but we've decided that you're going to share a cell.
Well, look, I'm just going to say Allie because I imagine that it's going to be as close as we could get to just sleepovers with Kate Jenkinson. Who, so I have to say that. But then beyond that, I feel like you'd want to stick pretty close to your Liz's and Doreen's and because Maxine. Oh, Maxine.
Maxine.
I mean,
You got to stay safe.
she's going to be neat. She's going to be protective. She's going to be gentle. She's got everything you want.
Yeah.
Okay, now I don't know if you discovered it through me, but how did you discover Talking Teal? Did I tweet it to you, or did you actually discover it on your own?
No. I discovered it on my own. It was. Well, I was a fan of the show, and so when you're looking into the show, you Google it, and then I don't know, a series of Google searches led me, and you were already sort of recapping it or doing your dissections of the episodes, and although that I had noticed that they've grown,
They got longer and longer.
they got longer and longer. Yeah, so no, I think I just came across it through Wentworth, like I imagine the way many people come across it, through fandom of a show leading me there. But it did mean, so I was absolutely aware of the existence before I started working on the show, and as I think I mentioned, it meant that by the time it got to my own episodes, for some reason, I mean, I just couldn't, there was no way that I could watch it. It was so terrifying.
Well, as I promised you, it was, especially for those episodes, it was all
I
a
appreciate
rave.
that.
If you could have seen us, oh my God,
We're not
see
scary. Really.
There was one. I mean, it's terrible. The others are much better at, everyone's different in terms of how much do you look online, and for good reasons, I think. Most writers. I mean, I remember reading Sorkin saying, it's the worst thing that you could do, and he never does it. I think he even thinks that it kind of ruined the newsroom or something like that he read too much online about it, and I noticed that I mean, Pete's obviously in a very unenviable position because ultimately he set up the show and is so wrapped up in it, but he clearly has a set of guidelines to I guess to maintain sanity. Probably, where I can't help myself to a certain extent. I'm especially for a show that was pre-existing, a show that I was a fan of myself. I was I found myself clicking and reading, and
you have to be able to filter things out. You have to be able to sort of figure out what you can take with a grain of salt, what you can toss away, and what you can sort of take in seriously. Media, I mean, everybody's a critic.
Well, and social media has taken it to the next level. I mean, really everybody's a critic, and everybody will let you know what they thought. So it is.
I had a friend who's. I was just going to say, I had a friend who's.
Sometimes with social media, though, because you get so many opinions, in a way that can be almost liberating because it makes you realize, well, even if I wanted to please everyone, I couldn't possibly because no one can agree on anything. You can see trends, and often, the best way for me to use it is just to use it in a sort of in a similar way that I guess if you were a playwright, you might listen to audience reactions and see what things trigger big reactions, but not necessarily. Not look at it as script notes or anything like that, because otherwise you're setting a trap for yourself.
Do you ever carry that to the writer's room and say, "Oh my God, the fans said this about that, so maybe we should rethink that next step or something"? Does it ever influence anything like that? I mean, you shoot it in advance.
Obviously, you couldn't even talk or imagine B's death without imagining the reaction to it, because
no,
I mean, the biggest one was I'm absolutely sure you're aware that that there's attention given to sort of the dead lesbian trope, and
good. We're happy to hear that there's attention given to that, because you don't hear that a lot.
Oh no! Oh God! And it was almost like, I remember a tipping point for that was as I saw it, that episode of the 100.
Mm-hmm. The Alexa.
Yeah, that was playing out in America. So I mean, I wasn't familiar with that show, but I certainly heard about it. And that happened like when we were. I mean, Wentworth was plotted and written well ahead of time, so we were in the process of it at that point, and it certainly it triggers discussions in a really good way. So in that sense, my reaction, absolutely, and it's good to if there's elements of representation that are troubling and are disappointing, it's worth being vocal about it, because it shifts the discussion. It really does, and certainly I remember in our thinking about it, I think the sense that that at the core of that argument is the sense that there's so few representations of gay characters on screen that it is disappointing when so many of them are tragic. And I guess the way that we hoped that the show might be seen is that it provides both. That on one, season 3, you get a grand romance that ends in a triumphant way, really, and so season 4 was a tragic end, but it wasn't the sole representation. You can see all different, like it's one of those rare shows that you can see different relationships with different characters, with different relationships with their own sexuality and different outcomes. But certainly all of that online attention absolutely affects my thinking, and it has an impact for sure. So
bring it on. You say keep going. Tweet me.
I mean, as a writer, I would say also just remember, that right. No one person is ever completely responsible for any of these things, and also, have empathy. Have empathy who you're addressing, but
Yeah.
but absolutely, yeah, bring it on, and it makes an impact. People can be skeptical about collectivism and social media and what difference does it make if you just make comments, but in actual fact, it does. So I, in that sense, I welcome it.
And you said impact. How would you say Wentworth impacted your life?
I mostly just that it just makes me. It just sets the bar really high, and it just makes me want to work harder. I mean, it's the most amazing characters. It is the best story engine of. It's got to be one of the best story engines in history. I mean, you can bring people in. Everyone comes in such dramatic circumstances, and yet it's confined. So I think ultimately, the two major ways for me is it raised the bar, but also I was finally got the opportunity to sort of to tell a story of someone tiptoeing into a discovery about their sexuality and all the nerves of anxiety of that. And so I feel like I got to see that story so beautifully realized, and so that's that's been impactful too.
Yes,
That's
and
great.
thank you for that fuck the labels scene, and thank you for fighting for it.
Oh, I should say it wasn't like a massive. It was only
Just-
question one, so I didn't have to be.
That's okay.
Yeah,
though.
he didn't have to go to the mat.
Yeah, no. I was actually see even that I was nervous about. It sounds like I'm nervous about anything, but I was a little bit paranoid that I love that line "fuck the labels," and I was so happy that it was embraced, because you could also argue. You could say embrace your labels,
That's my approach, but it depends on it. I mean,
yeah.
I embrace my label. I love my label, and I say, and as long as somebody else is using my label against me, I'm especially going to be proud of my label.
Yeah.
But also, there are a lot of people who are in the middle. So for them, fuck the labels work best.
Mhm.
So.
Oh yeah, and it's what B needed, to hear at that point.
Exactly.
But I'm just glad that it was received in the way that it was.
It
of
was.
Oh, please, we have a T-shirt that says "fuck the
Fuck
label."
the labels.
Several people have already bought it.
I love that.
And also, so before we ask you the final questions and let you go, because I know we took a lot of your time.
It's been great.
What is your message to the fans as we embark on season 5? I know you don't know anything of season 5, but just as a fan who was there as a crucial part of season 4, what can you tell? What kind of message do you think you want to give the fans?
I mean, my message, as always with Wentworth, would probably be: strap yourself in. Don't ever think you know where it's going, ever, and stock up on your whatever you need to get you through, and also I guess it would finally be and trust that there's this incredible team, particularly in Marcia and Pete and John, who have steered this ship from Pete from the start, but then the others from very early on, and trust that the chaos will come, and that even things that don't look like they're there for a reason will pay off in ways that you don't expect. So I mean, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it.
So stay sharp, stay focused.
Stay alert, but not alarmed.
I like that. Stay alert but not alarmed. Very interesting. Well, we're going to miss you.
As a warning, I shouldn't have used that one.
It sounds good.
It's always true with Wentworth.
I like that. I think it works for Wentworth for sure.
So, final questions. You like to ask?
So, who inspires you and why?
Oh, well, I instantly go. I can't help but go to the Wentworth ensemble, partially because I've just been watching the episodes in preparation for this, and I'm going to be. It sounds so corny and predictable, but I am going to say I was really inspired by watching Kate again. Not that I'd forgotten, but just to see her traverse those great, gentle, loving scenes in the kitchen, and then immediately afterwards the way that she was plunged into the worst devastation and desperation, and I, she's such what an artist and what a performer, and so I'm pathetically going to say her.
That's not pathetic.
That's not pathetic. And by the way, every time I talk to her about you, she starts gushing about how much she loves you and how fabulous you are and how like one of the most talented people on the planet. It's very mutual. How do you guys? How have you met?
There's one other bit that I remember really took my breath away when I was watching it. That inspired me. It was Danielle, and it was episode 4, and she screw lover, and she'd beaten up Will, which she sort of had to do to reclaim the upper hand, and then she was marched away. And I remember in the big print, I wrote something like, as she's marched away, you can see the pain of it all on her face, which is, easy for me to type that. I mean, what does that really mean? And then I watched again how she interpreted that. And it's just, she does so little, but it's all there. Everything you need is there. And and in that moment, her character's wearing a mask, but I don't know how she manages to do it, to find these ways that the pain comes through while still maintaining the facade. So that too was pretty inspiring.
That's great acting. That's really what artistry is about.
It's so full of fantastic actors, this show.
Yeah.
Okay, finally,
yes.
How would you spend the last day of your life? Just a little light question.
Ideally, just with people that I love, people, with my partner and my family, and I'd be eating a lot. I mean,
we're gonna get along. See,
yeah. I mean, it's funny because I do reach for would I be watching my favorite movies, but I think it would be eating. It would be a lot of eating and a lot of and swimming. I don't know why I love swimming. I love the water, and in fact, the water became a part of Wentworth too. But
I'll say.
Yeah, swimming, water, beach, loved ones, and lots of food.
Sounds like
a great day. I'll meet you there in about 40 years, 50, 60 years, 70 years. I'll be dead. But I'll be well dead. Oh, my God.
You'll be waving like Debbie.
Who knows? I'm not so sure.
I'll be 140 in 70 years. So. But other than that, it sounds great. It sounds like a great day.
Thank you for being so generous with your time. And
oh no, thank you. It was as I said, I'm a long time fan. First time.
Well, so we're really going to miss you.
Pleasure, my honor.
Well, even though I'm sorry that you weren't there for season 5, at least that meant that you could give us this interview. So I'm kind of happy about that.
Yeah, well, I know.
Selfishly,
I really, it would have been incredibly difficult to speak about anything.
Oh, the PR people would not have allowed it anyway.
Oh, they keep a very tight rein. But this was lovely. This was great, and we can't thank you enough. And I hope we can chat again some other time, even if it's not on camera. We love you.
I hope I can weasel my way back into that.
I'm sure that if
they're smart. Listen, you wrote 2 of the best episodes, 3 excellent episodes, but 2 of the best episodes ever on that show.
Ever.
Oh, and I said I really have to. I mean, Pete, Marcia, John, who were there through all of the plotting of that. I mean, that's such an incredible team, and the amount of input that they had, and of course the cast and director and everyone, it's such a good collaboration. So
it's a brilliant show.
It's a brilliant show with the best of every
from front to back. It really is amazing.
Yeah.
So all right, have a great day. I hope your banana bread is a big success.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward.
And good luck on your next projects.
Thank you.
We will see you in season 6.
And keep us posted. Keep in touch, okay?
I will, definitely.
Okay, great, Michael.
Thanks, darling.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.